Hi there, I am Angie Merle with Apprentice University. I'm the Director of Student Engagement here, and I have the distinct honor and privilege of working with some of our wonderful instructors here that we have with us today. I'm going to introduce to you in just a moment. We have some questions that interested people usually ask regarding how our classes run, what our education looks like, questions about our instructors and so forth. So we're going to try to answer some of those today. And we have the actual people who are in the classes every Friday with our students here with us today. We have 4 of our instructors slash facilitators with us. So I will go ahead and introduce you. I'm just going to tell you their names, and I'm going to tell you what they teach here at Apprentice University. And with that, we will start with that. That was Craig DeHutt. Craig has been teaching with us for quite a while. Craig is instrumental in designing our digital storytelling certificate. He teaches digital storytelling, DSLR video production, has taught a live streaming course in the past, and teaches an advanced digital storytelling course as well. We also have Paige Merle with us, and Paige teaches business writing, and she runs several different types of workshops for our students and our community, and she often teaches our orienteering class. Then we have Jeff Hoovner. Jeff also has been with us for quite some time. He teaches economics and our personal finance. And then we have Brian Hudson, who has been with us from the first day that we launched live classes. It was 4 years ago now. And he has taught a myriad of classes, all titled differently that don't exactly tell you necessarily what they're about, but modernism, books to keep sane by, faith, film, and dialogue, biblical theology to change the world, truth, beauty, and goodness. So we're excited to have them with us today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you all some questions and just have you talk about your thoughts about some of these. The first set of questions I'm going to ask you has to do mainly with yourselves. So I'll pose all of these questions to all of you right now, and then we'll have you answer individually. So we'd like to know, one, what is your profession outside of Apprentice University? And we do this in all of our sessions, so I'll go ahead and say this up front, is that our instructors, our facilitators are not hired faculty. They are all professionals out working in their fields of expertise. And so it's a very different model than a lot of academia. So we want you guys to tell us your profession outside of Apprentice University. How long have you been teaching in general, not just necessarily with Apprentice University, but teaching in general? And how long have you been teaching with Apprentice University? And maybe if you want to just touch on the topics you teach on. I introduced them, and you don't have to, but so those are the questions I'm going to pose to you. We will start with Brian.
Again, my name's Brian Hudson. Let's see here, my profession. I have been teaching for 30 years now. I know it seems odd that I'm only 32, so that means I was teaching since I was 2. And I have a master's degree in education, and I have a master's degree in theology. My profession, though, has been very entrepreneurial over the years. I presently am the president of the Clapham Circle, which is a nonprofit organization to help other nonprofits to grow in their visibility, influence, and impact. We do leadership searches. We do audits. We come in and help organizations, especially organizations that are helping kids and families and that are related more to educational side. I'm also a business owner on two companies. One is working for the government in manufacturing military ordnance. And then the other is a company that sells to PGA courses mowers for different applications. And so I kind of just float and do a lot of things, as well as to teach at AU. My classes, I would say that the classes there are that I teach are classes about meaning, finding purpose in life, understanding your biblical worldview, humanities. I really believe that if we're going to be entrepreneurs in this world, we need to be great human beings and well-adjusted and healthy, flourishing human beings. And so all my classes are geared around integration of faith and life, I guess, is probably the best way to describe that. And so that might be through literature, it may be through theology or biblical class, maybe through film, but all of it has to do with faith and life integration and vocation.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm gonna keep throwing you guys curveballs to not know who's going next. So how about Jeff, you're up.
Okay, well, my name is Jeff Hoovener. I've been teaching overall in general for about 10 years now. I've taught personal finance for high school here in Brownsburg for all this time and still continue that today. I am a small business owner here in town in Brownsburg. I have a promotional marketing company that I've run now for 16 years. And I also do personal financial coaching on the side as a second business as well. So in this troubled economy that we're in right now, where I'm seeing that side of my business just flourish with people that have questions about their personal finances. So my two subjects that I teach, as Angie said, were economics and personal finance. And both of those, I always teach from a very conservative point of view, both from a business economics side, talking about the macroeconomics, so the larger view of that. And then from a personal finance side, we would narrow it down now to our personal finances and what can we do to protect what we have and to use that hopefully for the glory of God in the end and being good stewards of what God has given us.
Thank you, Jeff, so much. Paige.
Yeah, so my name is Paige Deaton. We haven't changed my name here on Zoom yet. I got married about 6 months ago, and so my name has changed some places and not other places. I've been teaching at Apprentice University, I think, for a total of a year. I've worked here as the marketing manager for about 3 or 4 years at this point. Overall, I've been teaching for about 3 years as well. Outside of Apprentice University and the marketing and communications aspect of Apprentice University, I also work in communications and admissions at a classical school called Coram Deo Academy on the north side of Indianapolis. I also started my own business about 4 years ago called The Story Sketcher, which is dedicated to helping people distill complex ideas into simple visual stories. I also am an online teacher for another classical school, so I'm doing quite a bit. My main focus at Apprentice University when it comes to teaching are, as Angie said, business writing. So learning the formalities of what it's like to write in a variety of mediums within a professional workplace environment, as well as career orienteering. So helping students to learn maybe where they're thinking they'd like to go with their career and how they synthesize their interests, their passions, their strengths, talents all together to get a more clear picture of this is maybe the path that I want to pursue for my career.
Thank you. And Craig.
Sure. So I'm Craig D. Hutt. Angie, you may be able to correct me. I think I've been teaching at AU for about 2 years.
I think so, maybe even more.
Two and a half, perhaps. Yeah.
Yes.
I've been teaching in general in some form or fashion for probably close to 20, between teaching and public speaking, preaching, and Bible classes. My main job right now, I would distill it down into a video producer, a documentary filmmaker. So a freelance video producer. I help people tell their stories, small businesses and nonprofits. And then I'm also a co-founder of a nonprofit video production company. We travel overseas to the Bible lands, to Israel, and create free documentaries about the Bible. And that has, within the last 2 or 3 weeks, about what's been going on, has been very busy work. And some industries are really appreciating the time at home that families now have, and so we've been glad to be able to offer that for families now. The classes that I teach and the things that I focus on at Apprentice University could be distilled down into storytelling. I believe that every business and every individual has a story to tell, and what I'm trying to teach the students there at AU is how to do that well and how to do that with purpose. And so video, audio, right now we're doing a class that I helped, a small part helped with podcasting, helping equip these students to use the tools that are available and the tools that are upcoming to tell quality stories to help change people for the better.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm so glad you included podcasting. I'm sorry that I completely forgot that one that we just launched this session. So my next set of questions to you all is, what inspired you to decide to teach and facilitate courses at Apprentice University? And what is your favorite aspect of teaching here at Apprentice University? So we'll go in a different order. We'll start with Jeff this time.
So what inspired me was well, my youngest son actually attends classes, and so coming and listening to the whole Apprentice University model was a fascinating model, and it inspired me to really get involved more there, and to really understand and sit down with the students and get to know the students. And the interesting aspect about the way the class is run is you never know what topic is going to come up in your class. So I teach economics, but we may go off on a right curve because something that was economics related took us in a different direction, whether it be faith or whether it be religion. It could be any topic that may come up that has to do with economics. And to really sit down and to understand the thinking of the students and to get to know them is really the best part of Fridays. Now, we all have agendas we think we are going to accomplish, but the best part is we don't have to accomplish those agendas. We don't have to get through every piece of information that we said in our outline we're going to get through. It's more about the relationships and the interaction with the students that I love.
Thank you. Wonderful. Craig.
This is probably a similar answer to many of you. Honestly, it was a single conversation with Ron Brumbarger. To hear from somebody who had finally figured out a way to educate people in the way that I had always kind of believed was the most effective, and to see it done in such a creative and inspiring way. It was a single conversation with him, multi-hour conversation, I think, but, and to be given an opportunity that outside of the framework of AU, a professional like me would not be given the opportunity to speak to students in the way that we can, and to be allowed to incorporate my faith and convictions into education, again, in a way that is not common, to me is very encouraging and an opportunity I'm very thankful for. And then, like you said, just the students themselves, to sit down in a class and to know that there is so much that they can teach back to us as the instructors. So I get inspired and motivated just interacting with them for the brief periods of time that we have them there on Fridays, that challenge me creatively, to push me.
Paige?
Well, I feel that I might have two sides of a coin. One being that I actually started teaching here after I was already working here. So my inspiration was twofold in the sense that I was very excited at this prospect of engaging with the students more directly versus just filling the role of the marketing manager. And it actually ended up being really helpful in that perspective, as teaching and being in that direct communication with students then helped me to see more clearly what it is that makes our live classes in particular so helpful, which then in turns helps with marketing. But on a more personal level, I would say that the reason I was inspired to teach, particularly, I started with business writing, and I would say business writing was definitely something I've been passionate about for a while, because as a young entrepreneur, I really got thrown into a situation of emailing clients often and finding myself, even in the fact that you have to write proposals, contracts, emails, and resumes, and all of this content for professionals, and not really having all of the equipment to do that, and realizing that that's a very lost skill among people my age and younger. And there was a way that I could step in to help mediate that, to help train students in that skill so that they wouldn't have to go through the trial and error that I did. That would be something I was excited about. And as for career orienteering, I actually am really passionate about that particular subject, because when I was in high school, I actually went through the workshop, the orienteering workshop, when it was still a 3-day workshop prior to it becoming a class. And it was something that ended up getting me on my path into marketing. And because of that, I've always had a very special place in my heart for orienteering. And so when I got the opportunity to actually teach that to other people, obviously I jumped at it.
Thank you. And Brian, since you've been teaching with us the longest, go ahead.
I'm going to take this in 3 steps, right? So first is circumstance of the reason that I'm at Apprentice University. I make sure that everybody knows I was second choice. They didn't get their first choice from the beginning. A good friend of mine was asked to teach. At the last minute, Apprentice University moved to the west side of Indianapolis. He couldn't make it, and so he said, call Hudson, he'll do it, because just say yes. And so that's the circumstance. I've always just kind of been second chair there at the school. The global inspiration and reason are 2. The first is I believe that education is not only in crisis, it's in catastrophic mode. We have watched the educational system break down over and over again. It's been my heart to engage that world. I have appreciated Apprentice's approach to create space, a new space that is not being utilized right now. There are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of kids that are going to universities out of high school. They're not prepared. They go and drop out. They don't know what they want to do. They pay a lot of money, build up a lot of debt, and it's just the system is broken. And so this is a great space, whether a student uses this degree as a terminal degree, and I mean that by they want to get straight out into the world, well prepared, and I call it scholar kings, ready to go, and that they've built portfolios to make this work. Or if they decide to go the professional route, they have been well prepared for the next level of academia to get those certifications or degrees that they need to get to make a difference in the world. So the first global is education. The second one is related, and that is I believe that we're losing a whole generation of young people. We are in a crisis in this world. If the research is right, then 60% of our kids that start high school that say that they have a serious faith are leaving the church, and by the end of high school, 85% are leaving the faith by the end of university, which means that somebody's not doing their job, and that's, you know, family, church, and so that crisis for me has been a driving factor of my life, and so then the personal side of it is this. Many of us have our life verses. I've had 3 in my life, and the last one, which I believe is my last one in life, is in Psalm 71. It says, "Oh God, from my youth you have taught me, and I still proclaim your wondrous deeds. So even in old age and gray hairs, oh God, do not forsake me until I proclaim your might to another generation, your power to all those to come." My inspiration every week, I tell people that the healthiest I feel is being a learner, a journeyman learner with the students. I'm so blessed to have students who have taken class after class, and they haven't missed one. I have students who take the morning class and then turn around and take my classes again, even though I only have the same 5 stories, and they just keep wanting to hear and listen to it. So the joy for me, and where I feel the pleasure of God most in my life is with young men and women who are truly seeking and trying to figure out what's next, and what they believe, and why they believe it.
Thank you so much. And he was not second. It was absolutely exactly the way it was supposed to happen, right? It was absolutely what was supposed to happen. We all know that. The next question I have is, a couple of you touched on it, maybe all of you sort of did, but we might want to dig in just a little bit deeper, is what do you believe are the elements of a good education? And what do you see as the major challenges that we face in higher education? And how do you feel that Apprentice University is addressing those challenges? And so what I'll do is I'll just open it up to whoever wants to answer this question first, if you don't mind.
I will. Yep. No, this is something that is an obsession in my life, and the reason I don't sleep. So there's several things. One is that, like I said, the educational system is broken in the sense of we have what's called information inflation in this world. We now have access to terabytes and terabytes of information at the tip of our fingers. And most education is information regurgitation. It has nothing to do with why we learn what we learn, or how do we utilize that, or the fact that it's holistic, that each subject is connected to the other. And so one of the things I think Apprentice does, and I think Jeff made this point when he said, you know, it could go anywhere, but it still relates back, whether it talks about religion and economics or whatever it might be. And so I think that one of the things that Apprentice does is that it gives that format to allow students to move and grow and dialogue where they're at, but it's not just a regurgitation. It truly is growing in your knowledge and wisdom about the world itself, and which makes for a very, very healthy people. The second thing is, I think that there's a need and an understanding that we've got to back up in our educational world, and we have to begin to teach to receptivity first, right? We don't just teach information or knowledge and then application and synthesis and all those things that they talk about in taxonomies. You have to build lifelong learning. And I believe that one of the things, again, that Apprentice does really well is it builds a context which leans towards Socratic learning, right? So it's a dialogue that's going on. It's a dialogue that that good teachers always know where they're heading, but they're always heading in community together. And I think third is the idea of community. That there is no real true learning unless you begin to do that in together, and that you have those dialogues, and it's overflowing into life itself with the family, with your friends. And again, I think this context is a great context for real dynamic and meaty, I guess is the word I would think of, meaty learning, something to bite down on and to chew on and to use and not just use and utilize, but to shape and transform life. And so I've always used this term or this phrase that education is meant to be minds enlightened, hearts inflamed, and lives transformed. And most of education is just dealing with the mind, but not the affections in the heart, and not with the overflow of how I react to the world and how I engage the world. And so I'm deeply appreciative of the context that allows that to flourish.
It's wonderful. Anyone else?
I can jump in on this if that's okay. So I would say, kind of in answer to both of your questions combined, there's multiple angles that I could take on this. One of which would be, I would say something that makes education at Apprentice University really valuable, like Brian Hudson said, is that you are not just getting thrown a bunch of content that you then just have to kind of remember, and then maybe later in your life you're going to get to apply. Instead, there's real training in digging deeply into conversations and then applying immediately. And not just that, but more importantly, building habit of doing that. And so in the long term, you're going to see actual growth in your ability to be a good learner who actually likes to learn. I know, as just someone who went to a traditional college that was actually a really good school, my favorite classes were always those that not many other students took, because they were the ones that were super impractical or the ones that were more discussion based. Those were always my favorite because those are the ones you learned the most in, because instead of just giving you a bunch of knowledge that you then are supposedly going to use sometime in the future, they actually try to train you to develop the habits of learning and the love for learning. And I think that's one of the most valuable aspects of the kinds of classes that we have here and the kinds of courses that we have here, is that they're focused on not necessarily just the topic at hand, but how this is going to grow you as a person over time. And then in kind of the answer to the other question that you asked, namely, what is it about higher education that we're seeing that might have that we're trying to address, I would say that is kind of the contrast between Apprentice University and a lot of other traditional education formats. You hear from these teachers here that in many places they would be denied the ability to teach just because they don't have a degree that tells people that they can teach, whereas they are actually incredibly skilled professionals who are more than qualified to be teaching in the areas that they work in because they work there. And I think that's something that higher education really misses, is that because they expect some kind of degree from their professors, they're missing out on the actual people who are equipped to train students to do the things that they're actually claiming they're equipping students to do. And of course, there's also the added issue of you're sacrificing all of the knowledge of these amazing individuals to learn from a textbook and learn a bunch of facts that you'll then forget when you get a piece of paper that costs you quite a bit more money than it's actually worth in the long term. And I think more and more people are starting to realize that maybe it's not quite worth it to pursue that avenue of education.
Thanks.
And I'll jump in here just a little bit to play off of what you just said. Not only are we as instructors given an opportunity that would otherwise be denied to us, I don't have a degree that says I can teach college-age students. But we are also giving these students that same ability to go into an interview and maybe they don't have a piece of paper that says they earned the amount of credits to justify hiring them. We have equipped them instead with practical real world experience and knowledge that has been demonstrated and can be then given to an employer. That's in my industry specifically, but in most industries, that's what employers are looking for anyway. I've personally never had anyone ask me about my piece of paper, which is ironic because they never actually sent it to me and I wasn't really bothered by it. It's not hanging on my wall anywhere. They forgot to send it to me and no one cares. The employers that I have spoken with, they want to see what you can do and they want to see who you've done it with, who have you worked for and what have you done for them. And what I've been so impressed with, even in just the short time that I've been involved with these students, is they are coming out of this program with far more practical, real world knowledge than I had when I was 30. And it's astounding. And we're hearing from employers. These are the kind of people. These are the kind of potential employees that they've been looking for a long time, and no one really is concerned about the lack of the piece of paper. So we're giving them an opportunity that so far has been denied to them, but is more and more becoming what is needed and necessary in the workforce.
Great. Jeff, you have anything?
Yeah, I'm going to add just real quick here. Everybody said some awesome things, but just to add one quick thing, that we are also equipping the students to have a voice where traditional education doesn't necessarily give you a voice. Like I talked about, the conversations can go off on a right turn in our classroom settings, but that's because we have told our students that we want to hear from you. We want to have this open dialogue back and forth. And in some of my subjects, talk about personal finance, and I teach to have $1,000 emergency fund and don't ever have a credit card. Those are not something that you would typically hear in the world today. Emergency funds are not heard of, and credit cards, everybody's going to have a credit card. So it is amazing to me that we see these students go out into the world, talk with people that they're working with, they're apprenticing next to, and they start these conversations, and they may say, well, my instructor said never to have a credit card, and then they come back and tell me what they said. And it's great to have these conversations and to have that open dialogue back and forth, and that they are learning not just to regurgitate a test, but to have practical answers for the real world that they're going to live in and work in.
That's wonderful. Thank you all so much. And again, because we have classes that are for our post-secondary apprentice program, we have classes typically on Fridays only because our apprentices are out working Monday through Thursday. So all of these wonderful people here teach on Fridays. So I'm going to ask you a really difficult question is, what does a typical class look like for you on any given Friday? And how do you assess a student's accomplishment in the skills areas related to the things that you teach? And then thirdly, we often get asked this question by students and families is, what if a student's having difficulty with the material or keeping up? So that's kind of a series of questions, and I can pose them again if you forget, but what does it look like in a typical class? How do you assess what's happening and the skills and information that students are applying? And then what if they're struggling?
So a typical class on a Friday, in both of my classes that I teach, I always start with what I call a news notebook. So I have my students every week, they have to be in the news to find something about the subject that we're talking about. So whether it's about economics in the news or something about personal finance, right now there is a ton of personal finance going on in the news, obviously. So they come back and we go through each students' news notebook. So we're talking about these subjects just to get them thinking, get them talking. And this is where it gets me in trouble, because some of these subjects, these articles are so good that it takes us off on these different, the right turns I've been talking about. Okay. So we start with that, and then we dig into the content of their week as well. Always talking about around the dinner table, what were discussions like around at the office, if they're apprentices and they're in an office, or what did their week look like, and then get into practical content for the week as well. How do I assess? It's really the back and forth. They have to be able to demonstrate that they understand what we're talking about in some way. And that is by them breaking out of their shell if they are a very reserved student, and we have those. But also, if you're a very outgoing student, it is to not hold back your opinion, or I'm sorry, not to share your opinion every time. It is to sometimes hold back opinions as well, and to absorb information that was shared and dialogue back and forth. And then your last question, Angie, was, if they're struggling. I've never had a student that really was struggling to keep up that did not reach out to say, here's where I'm at. What can I do to really get caught up or to stay on track? We have this open dialogue, not with just the students on Fridays, but I think all of us would say that we're open to dialogue with families, with the students throughout the week as well.
Thanks, Jeff. Anyone else?
Well, I love your idea, Jeff. I may actually try to do that more consistently. It typically happens that it's not uncommon for us to just kind of ask each other, what have you watched this week? What have you seen on YouTube? Or in the case of the podcasting class, what have you guys been listening to? And we can share, this is a really good podcast and this is why you all should subscribe to it. Or I just watched this video and it just really got me inspired. Sometimes we'll even watch those things in class. And that's good for all of us. It's good for me. There's no way that we can all be consuming all of the best content. And so that collaboration is good to kind of kick things off. Practically speaking, how do I assess if they're doing well? Really, just like you, Jeff, it's not that I need, award-winning content from every student in every class. What I need is students who are willing to accept criticism and revisions from anyone, from myself and from the other students, and do their very best to adjust. Sometimes pivot, sometimes reshoot, sometimes we had one student who I think was on his plan D by the time he created a capstone project and pulled it off and did well. And so just being willing to be flexible and show me that the desire is there, that they have enough of the information internal that they can then execute that idea, and a willingness to accept criticism. That is paramount. I will typically say that an editor who has sensitive feelings won't last very long in the industry. You have to be willing to put yourself out and accept that criticism, and be willing to hear from people, this is no good, and this is how I suggest making it better. And then how do you work with a student that may be struggling? And we've had a few. I have been impressed overall with the caliber of these students, like I've never seen anywhere. But there are still times where there are issues. It is not uncommon by the end of each class for them to have my personal email address and my cell phone number. Text me, email me, reach out to me. If you're on a shoot, take a picture of what you're looking at and send it to me and ask me, how's the framing of this shot? And I encourage that, and I want to make myself available to each of them. Sometimes it involves, and it should, one-on-one sit-down conversations for as long as they need to take to talk about how things can improve and what they can do. That's one of the things I appreciate very much about Apprentice is we aren't required to teach 150 kids at a time, because we wouldn't be able to give them the proper time and attention that each of them need. The classes are the right size. I feel that whether that's done after class, I'll go out and meet them for coffee somewhere and discuss how we can improve. And the vast majority of the students have been very receptive to that.
So let's start with struggling students. That's a loaded question because the thing is that if education is to grow human beings, right, to grow them up, struggling is a word that shifts and changes for each student. So there are some students that have never learned to learn. They've never fallen in love with learning. There's some students who struggle with the discipline of regular engagement or reading. And there are some who are just trying to survive life. And then the fourth is ignorance. My students, and Caleb will attest to this, I say probably 5 times a class, ignorance isn't a sin. As long as you don't stay there, right? It's okay not to know. It's okay not to be good at something at this point in time. That's the whole point of learning. If all you're doing is doing the things you know how to do, you're not learning anything. So I'm the same way Craig just said. I meet with students for coffee. I got an hour phone call with a student yesterday that wanted to just get counsel about life. And we have movie nights, and we have times I try to stay after for usually an hour, 2 hours, where a couple of us, or 1 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people will just sit around and continue the conversation. And so, the issue of struggling, you should have a safe environment to be where you are and to be loved enough that we love you where you are, but love you enough not to want you to stay there. And so that's probably the way I would say that. Secondly, when it comes to what my classes are like, I think the students would say it's a chaotic symphony. But actually, I kind of view it as I walk in because I'm a learner first. I think great teachers are first and foremost learners. So I'm coming in with things that I've watched, things that I've seen, read, a quote that just has inspired me. And I go what I call fishing. I begin a dialogue. I may begin with a 600-year-old prayer. I may begin with some quote that's, obscure, or a movie clip, or star. And the goal is to begin to fish until you begin to get traction of where they're at, because if I think good teachers know exactly where they want to go, and everything applies to that. So you take Caleb will like this. You take the idea of purpliness, right? The purple, and you can weave it back into great teaching and literature and everything else. So I think that's the classes. I'm sure feel somewhat chaotic. I'm ADHD, and so but surprisingly, I actually know where I'm going, and I can pull about anything anybody says or wants to talk about into where I'm heading. Then the third is what do the projects look like? Well, the first thing I do is I find out what other projects are going on. I love the podcast deal, right? So I'm encouraging students, as many as possible. For instance, where we have these 4 or 5 books to keep sane by. My hope is that one student will pick just a book and want to do a podcast dialogue or interview session for each of those chapters, and try to share how they impact life, and why they are worth reading 10, 20, 30 times in your life. Or to take a topic and then take all those books and begin to mix them together, and again, either podcast it individually or do it in an interview type style. I try to, as much as I can, engage it in the culture. I think one of our best projects that we did was to change the world, where each of them had to pick a certain topic of an organization that was making a difference. It didn't matter what it was, but an organization is making a difference, and to actually go visit, dialogue, and then begin to put together a presentation on what are the problems in those areas, where do they need help, and what does it look like if you would take this to the next level. If you took this on yourself, how would you grow this movement or this idea? So youth prisons was one of those, and it was amazing project, and there were ideas flowing continuously of ways to continue that work. And my hope at the end of every class is that whatever they've started, whether they decide to write, whether they decide to present, whether they decide to podcast, vlog, or any of those things, or start something, that this is not, it's an open-ended project. I hope that these things will continue to go on for years and years to come, that they'll pull it back out, that they'll find a group of people that are excited about it and run with it as they continue to grow in their understanding. So that would be my answer to those questions.
Thank you so much. And I will just say this. I have had the special privilege of watching capstone projects in all of your classes throughout the years. And the things that you see on capstone days are just amazing. The one you spoke of, Brian, the prison project, wow, a moving, going out to a homeless tent city. Another one, Craig, you know, the videos that come out on capstone days in your classes are unbelievable. And Jeff, I will never forget one of your classes where I sat in and I watched one of our students present a 20-year life budget that it was obviously we were looking into the heart of this person and what they were particularly struggling with and what their life was potentially going to look like based on some personal circumstances. And that's real, right? It's real, and all of you do that. And for anyone that's listening to this, I will say that our capstone projects, that is how we allow students to engage in a way that allows them to apply their knowledge and make it known. And we do encourage the crossing over of different, because it was what you've heard here is that it's all intertwined. Podcasting, modernism, finance, right? Whatever it is, it's intertwined. And so we encourage students to make a video that works for their capstone in another course, or to make a podcast, right? It's all of that happens as crossovers in our classes. So then one of the last things I want to ask, and I'm going to ask specific questions to specific people here. And so Craig, I'm going to direct this particular question to you. Since your classes are typically more of that skills-based class, they are producing something that they have grown in hard skills with in digital storytelling. So could you speak to the growth that you see in students in your classes, and obviously under your guidance and mentorship, but maybe a student who walks in has never even hasn't even photographed maybe, or even ran their phone on video before, and then they go through your full program and what happens on the other side.
Sure. We have had students like that, where you're directing them on how to turn the video mode on their phone. That's becoming less and less the case now. But yeah, there have been some students who have maybe, unfortunate for them, taken every class that I've offered. We even have a couple that have taken digital storytelling multiple times just to further refine the skills that are taught in that class. It's been astounding. It's been astounding because I can't think of a less like old man term to use than flabbergasted. I don't know, Brian, maybe you can help me here. I'm flabbergasted that I'm even teaching a class on how to shoot video with your phone. Because when I graduated from film school 2007, we were thrilled that they were taking 1 megapixel pictures, our phones. And so the idea that I'm encouraging them to shoot and edit and produce using nothing but that tool is astounding. And what they're able to do with it now is beyond what I was expecting from them, which is awesome. And to be able to see those students that start with digital storytelling or simply using phones to then move on to the class that we introduced, where we allow them to shoot with DSLR, basic DSLR cameras. And then there was a 6 or 8 students who then took the advanced DSLR, which introduced lighting, microphones, and more advanced equipment. The variety of projects that came out of that class, I really tried to ease up on telling them what to create. Specific genres, I was not defining that for them, or time lengths or anything like that. And the variety of skill sets that were demonstrated, again, was outstanding. And then I have students who have worked their way through the Apprentice University program. They now have really nice jobs. And I'm still getting texts and messages from them saying, I'm in New York right now shooting this video. What do you think of this shot? It's fantastic. It really is fantastic. Angie, I've encouraged some of your kids actually to purchase nice equipment and to help them shop for that, and to see what they're doing with it is very encouraging, because not just because it's entertaining to watch, but that's what employers in this industry are looking for. And some of the pieces that have come from digital storytelling on phones are better than some of the pieces I was seeing in my portfolio class in school. And that's fantastic. And that's not necessarily touting my own abilities. It's touting these students who love to learn and who love to push themselves beyond the basic tools that I'm offering them. So I've been thrilled to see, and as we continue to offer more and more of these advanced classes, what they're able to come up with.
Thank you very much. And we have students who are being paid in apprenticeships using their videography skills that Craig has helped them gain, and who have been paid doing projects, and who are now employed fully with that. Brian and Jeff, I'm going to kind of send this your way. We are very, very heavily oriented to critical thinking skills in Apprentice University. The idea of true thought and creativity and innovation, and how you need to be able to critically think through things in order to do that. Would you please speak to what you all experience regarding the ideas of critical thinking in your classes, if you would?
First of all, I want to ask the question of why flabbergasted is an old man's term, and why I was linked to that term.
Not because you're an old man, it's because you have, I think, the best vocabulary of any human being I've ever encountered.
So you could have used astonished, or stunned, blown away, bowl over, overcome, overwhelmed. But old man word, what's the deal? I mean, I'm just disappointed. I think I'm done. So critical thinking comes in a lot of ways. First of all, you have to have that safe environment. So because the goal is to challenge ideas and to challenge one another, to learn not to respond sometimes as much in answers, but to respond with questions, right? To clarify, to define, to argue, to take another point of view, and so you have to have settings that allow for that to take place, where it feels safe. It doesn't feel like I'm being listen. These young people, my students, probably harangue me and harass me and flabbergast me with their criticism of, am I defining this word correctly or whatever. They've done more to challenge my own critical thinking. Part of it is understanding how critical thinking works and try to integrate that in, but so much of it's just in environment. It also has to do with, I believe that our culture has lost the ability to read. And sometimes I think it's important for students and people to begin to read things that are above where they're at, and then to have the help to understand how an argument is built, to see it happen on paper, to underline thesis and ideas and counter thesis, and to be able to find those things. And I think that happens when you start to read old books. And so again, one of the things that I push hard on is that if the person hasn't been dead for 15 years, you try to find books that the person's not been around for at least 50 to 100, 200, 300, 400 years. And then it's okay to come back and say, I didn't understand it. And then to go through it together and to begin to go, I can see how that argument's built. Some of it's just practice. And I think just one more thing having to do with the psychology of the culture. We live in a culture that almost gets to the point where we just quickly say, well, I'm not that smart, or I'm not a good reader, or I don't have that skill, or whatever it might be. And I think it has killed the potential for learning because people, students give up so quickly. And so I set that tone in my class that this just, don't ever tell me that something's boring, because the problem is not the book, it's you're the bore. And just be humble enough to realize right now you're not strong enough to understand or have the abilities to quite understand what's going on. And that's okay. But at least give it its credit and its due, and I'll help you figure it out. So a lot of it's just the way we approach those things, but critical thinking comes in multiple ways, but those are just some of them.
I would add to that, Angie, that, and Brian said this as well, and it's really having that open dialogue, the back and forth, and the safe place to ask questions, so that they're not going to be criticized for asking those questions. And it really comes down to, so much is caught in our society that, it's really not, we're not taught these things. We're just, it's learned by the people that we're around. So when we try to teach critical thinking, it is think different maybe than just what you've experienced your entire life. So when we're talking about economics and personal finance, a lot of parents have different views than what I teach. And I know that, right? I understand that. And that's okay. I want the students to end up with their determining what's right for them in the end. We don't have to do things the way mom and dad did it. We sure don't have to do things the way Mr. Hubener does it. It is what is best for me in the end. And I love when students come up to me, whether it's during my class or, seeing them in the hallway, and they just ask a question of, well, here's my situation, and this is what we talked about in class. How do I get there? It's not just as easy as ABC. It is, I just don't understand how I can get there. Whether it's the $1,000 emergency fund. I have a student that updates me almost every week, and he was in my class a year ago with, well, here's where I'm at now with my emergency fund, which is great. I love that dialogue back and forth. And it was well, $1,000 is going to take me a long time to get there. So how do I do that? And, we just walked through what that looks like. And it's that open dialogue, that safe place to ask those questions, I think is important as well.
Thank you. And then Paige, I'm gonna send this one your direction. Is we talk about our foundation certificate and the idea that certificate alone, it doesn't matter what career field you're going to end up in, that these are life skills, that you need these skills wherever you're going to be, doing whatever you're going to do is what we try to explain to people. And I think that the two classes that you teach actually really set that forward, right? As we hear a lot from people that, to your point, Brian and Jeff, regarding, I'm not good at it, so I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to read, I'm not going to write, I'm not good. And give up early. So we hear a lot about, well, I'm not a good writer, so I'm not going to go into something where I have to write. So Paige, go ahead and speak to the idea of skills that are needed across the board in life and why it's so important.
Yeah, so that comes up a lot, especially when we first started the business writing course here at Apprentice University, because I remember being told before I taught that, by the way, we've actually had to force a few people into your class because they need your help, even though they don't think that they need it or want it. And so I came in with that mindset, knowing that that was what I was going to be facing. And frankly, that continued in the next session. Most of the people who were in business writing were students who didn't feel like they were going to go in a career where they needed to write. Or alternatively, I had a few creative writers who just said, well, I'm going to write creatively, so I don't need to know how to do business writing because I just need to be good at this other kind of writing. And particularly with business writing, what I always tell my students in business writing is that you may think right at this moment that you can pursue a career that requires you to never communicate in a written format with another human being. You're always going to be wrong. I work in admissions, and normally that's presented as a job where you're going to be meeting with people face to face and talking with them face to face a lot, and just running kind of the marketing and enrollment. Well, what they didn't tell me was that 99% of my job takes place over email. And I am constantly writing to people all the time. And I didn't sign up to be a copywriter. I didn't sign up to be an admissions person who's constantly writing to people over email every five minutes. But that is the career that I pursued, and even though I thought that maybe it wasn't going to take as much writing as it has, it's taken an immense amount of writing in a variety of areas I never would have expected. And that's becoming more and more the realization that people are having, is that they get into a career and they realize, oh, it actually matters how I correspond to other people. It actually matters whether or not I'm writing grammatically, even if it is something as simple as an email that you're sending to someone. You might not do it very often, but even having that ability to write a professional email, write a professional cover letter, create a proposal, those skills are so transferable to so many different areas. And I would say that about all of our foundation skills. They're transferable to any career that you want. So regardless of what career you envision yourself having, it's invaluable to have those skills because they are useful in any area that you pursue.
Great. And then I'm gonna in 1 second here, I know a couple of you have to jump off, and that's great. We are so thankful to have you. I'm gonna open it up here. Mitch, I don't know if you have any questions that you would like to propose, but certainly we'd love to have you jump on if there is anything that you want to ask any of these particular instructors. We'd love to have you ask. Just jump right in. Otherwise, I want to give a quick shout out again. You all are amazing. We are blessed to have you at Apprentice University. I'll say again, you are all incredibly busy professionals, and the amount of time that you are willing to give into mentorship of our students is absolutely amazing. It is not seen anywhere else, and we are well aware of that, and I believe that that's what all of our apprentices and all of our students would say. So thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this with us. I will open it up either to Mitch or anyone else, and if any of you have any just things that you'd like to say, then we'll do that. And if you have to jump off, that's great.
I don't have any specific questions, but I did want to say thank you all for talking, and I did get a lot of good insights from all of your different experiences and what you guys have been talking about today. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Mitch.
Hey,
Good to
you're
see your
welcome.
face, man.
Yeah, good to see you too.
I look forward to meeting you sometime.
No, this has been good. It's been good for me just to kind of see your all's faces. We are missing interacting with the students on Fridays, and it's cool to answer some questions for you, Mitch.
All right. Well, with that, thank you all again very much. And I would say, please go out and outside and enjoy this weather. And I know that everybody doesn't have great, huge plans because we're all confined. But thank you so much for taking your time to do this, and have a wonderful day.